Hi, everybody. Welcome from London. I don't know if you can see very much out there. I'm in London right now. Happy to be giving this lecture remotely. This is topic 12, and this goes very well with topic 11, anthropometry. This is workstation design. So the idea is I've broken this up into two subsections, one that deals primarily with fitting humans physically into a workstation, and then the other that's a little more visual and cognitive oriented. But the idea here is that we've just learned statistical techniques in anthropometry to determine the sizes of humans. And now we want to say, once we know how big our human population is, let's design the workstation around them that has a lot to do with human shape and size. Excuse me. All right, so first off, you maybe have seen at some point an ergonomic sort of workstation example, how to sit at a computer correctly. Hopefully not like this. That's just hilariously bad. But in each case, we have physical and cognitive implications that may impact the work system. So why are we interested in human factors and workstation design? This is one of the main areas that human factors engineering can make an impact in the overall functioning of a system, because it's essentially the interface that plugs the human into the rest of the system is the workstation, right? So this is obviously silly, but the idea is, we are taking the functions that the human needs to perform, and we are orienting those functions around them when they're in the space where they're performing the work. And so the way that those things are distributed around that space can affect the outcome. So in general, we're looking for these classic human factors solutions: improving the productivity of the system, reducing human error, making the system safer or more comfortable. Okay. There are these 6 design principles that go with topic 12, and I've broken them up into the first 4, which is, I think, primarily about the physical dimensions of a workspace, and then visibility and component arrangement. There's some physical nature to that, but it's about, can I see the thing, and cognitively, can I find what I want? Or if I have a series of tasks to do, can we arrange the workspace in a way that supports the sequence of steps I may need to perform? Okay, so the first subtopic is, we're going to talk about physical considerations in the workstation. Okay, so the way to think about, actually, let me go back. So we're going to go requirements for largest users, for the smallest users, for maintenance, and then adjustability. And each of those should be able to fit physically the humans that will interface with them. So first of all, let's talk about our largest demographic for our system here, large users here. So designing for this group means, ensuring the accessibility of various, control elements, various system components. I'll use that term in the subtopic components, and making them accessible, to the human operator, who is the center of our system here. So, passageways have to be tall and wide enough to accommodate the humans who will be passing through them. This is a bigger deal if you have a team of basketball players than you do if you have a team of gymnasts, but at the same time, it's something that has to be considered. And not only, can I comfortably walk upright in this airplane or whatever, which not many of us can, but is there space for all of our limbs to interface and do the things that we need our limbs to do? Can we reach the controls with our hands? Is there a place for us to put our legs, even if they're not interacting, with the system in a task-oriented way? And the other thing is we have to consider special populations. So this isn't just, let's go to the military standard 1472G and look up the anthropometry tables and take the 95th percentile and say we're good, because then there are differently abled populations who may be in a wheelchair, and that has different dimensions. Women at times change shape dramatically when they are pregnant, or I guess men can change shape dramatically too, due to anybody can change shape dramatically due to their food intake, I should say. But clearly, like, a pregnancy, in a short period of time changes that shape, changes, how somebody might interface at a desk even, right? So typically we have a, kind of a design standard we go for. 95 percentile is a nice, convenient value. It tends to be, if we look in our anthropometry tables, that tends to be one of the, one of the values that's listed already, at least it is in 1472G. So we'll take that 95th percentile and the dimensions of that human, and we'll say, well, the workspace, the desk, whatever, has to be at least, large enough to accommodate these people. Additionally, clothing matters. So usually with anthropometric data, you're assuming minimal clothing or no clothing. And obviously in almost all contexts, humans are operating in a work environment with clothes on. And that clothing can have certain thicknesses, and it can, reduce maneuverability, dexterity, on the fingers, for example. If you're wearing gloves, that's a big issue for a lot of the research I'm doing currently. So you have to consider that. So in some sense, you may start with the anthropometry and make sure you add on, the worst case scenario of expected clothing. This is an issue for us in the military research, which is the reason I'm here in London right now, because soldiers are typically wearing not only, military garb. They actually call it a blouse, and that's funny to some people, but a blouse. Okay, so military blouse, and but then they may have, several layers of additional equipment that are on their body. So we're going to interface them into a vehicle, and we're thinking about things like, like shoulder and waist belt harnesses. They have to be able to accommodate a fully equipment laden soldier. All right. So why is this important? If the tallest users are not able to access controls, etc., they cannot perform, as effectively in that system. So it's going to limit those who can, serve that role. Or you put them in there and they don't fit, and they have awkward postures, and these postures lead to physical problems. They also have, workers who are less than happy to go to work and be uncomfortable in that position. And it could actually lead to injury, which then, the employer, if it's a work system that you're employed in, they may be, responsible to cover healthcare costs related to that. All right, so that's our largest users. Let's go down to the smallest ones. So primarily, if we've made a system large enough to fit a large human, a small human can also fit in there, and we may need to give them additional, support to be able to reach everything. But our minimum, I should say, our minimum reach distance that we need to think about here is, let's take the 5th percentile human. Like if we took 95th percent for the largest humans, let's take 5th for the smallest. That seems to make sense. And things like, critical controls that need to be reached, like a light switch, I guess, ought to be reachable by this smallest representation of our population. Just like with largest users, where you need a little more room for clothing, in this case, clothing can be restrictive of our reaching movements. And so we have to consider that, in the design as well. And so what we'll consider here, so obviously, I can reach here, I can reach there, I can reach everywhere. If we determine the entire range of 3D space that a human may be able to reach with their hands, we call this the reach envelope. Okay, so it just basically defines the entire 3-dimensional conical space around me where I might conceivably be able to physically contact a control. And this is typically what a reach envelope might be documented. There's actually some in 1472H. You may find, I just used this one because it was a 5th percentile female. The one in the 1472H is 5th percentile male. Just trying to be consistent with my previous page there. So in any case, centimeters or inches, whatever you're looking at here, this defines where you ought to put the most critical aspects of a workstation need to be reachable by everybody. And so this is your sweetest, most valuable space, at the workstation. Consider also, so everything should be within reach if it's critical to reach it. Secondarily, heavier sorts of activities, if I have to lift something, if I have to exert force on something, it's a lot easier to do that when those things are closer to me in my workstation. So you want to reserve this, most precious right next to me space for the things that maybe need that sort of leverage. It's a trade-off, right? Because again, this is also very valuable space. If you're not going to do this, even if it's a heavy task, if you're not going to do it very often, the priorities shift a little bit. And we'll talk about that some in the second subtopic as well. All right, so largest users, smallest users accounted for. Maintenance is a special type of user because they typically need to interface with the system in different ways from the worker, from the worker that we're designing to use that station, because they got to get in and fix things, and they need to be able to get clearance to fix things with their hands and with whatever tools they may have. And if you've ever spent, the better part of a Saturday afternoon under the sink trying to fix things, you realize how important it is that the design does consider for the fact that, sometimes I or another person may need to get in there and fix things, to be able to have a functioning system. Okay, and then adjustability requirements. This pretty much is, there's a couple of slides here, but the ways that you can adjust the workpiece, the workstation, the human relative to the workpiece. There's a lot of different ways that a station could be made uniquely, spatially, distributed based on the needs and preferences and sizes of the humans interfacing. So there's a lot of different ways we can adjust the workspace. A lot of really clever, desk designs and things allow for raising, lowering, extending. I've got a standing desk in my office that allows me to put it up to stand, put it down to sit. So it's adjusted. I'm at the same workspace. And standing versus seating, something we'll talk about here in a moment too, but that's also, a consideration for the type of work that you're doing. You may need, or you may benefit from having a workstation that can both be in a standing position and in a seated position. So I can adjust the workstation itself, clever sorts of hardware there. I can adjust the position of the worker relative to the workspace, right? So there are things like booster chairs and stools, and this is a perfect example because if anybody ever has, if you have small people in your life, children or otherwise, or will, you typically would not pay to have the entire sink station be adjustable to go down to be reachable by this population. It's a much cheaper, much easier solution to provide, a way to adjust the position of the human relative to the workstation. We can also adjust the workpiece itself, and these are two examples of things that humans could manually interact with, but it's made a lot easier if that very heavy thing is suspended in a way that allows easy access at all sides. Or, I have precision work to do here, and I can adjust my visibility of that piece, and I can have hand with a soldering iron and my solder, and it's holding the piece in place. I've got one of these things, by the way. I use it for all my nonsense. We can also adjust the tool, and these are just examples of classic adjustable tools. You can imagine trying to paint the side of a barn if you couldn't extend your paint roller to be able to reach 15 feet up. And then what are you going to do? So yeah, this, the tool being able to extend is an easy way to make that workspace adjustable. And then of course, there's a whole bunch of different hand tools that are, by their nature, designed to be adjustable to a lot of different ranges. All right, 1472H, our military standard, does have some excellent, very well-defined, sorts of dimensional minimum requirements. Not in every case do they say preferred, but minimum shouldn't go smaller than that. Then you can think about stuff like our anthropometry and our clothing expectations for our population. But yep, page 271 ought to give you some really good data here if you're ever required, for example, final exam, to consult what might be a good military standard recommended dimension for this workstation. So check that out. Oh, also I want to just point out, because in the previous lecture, sorry, the previous topic 11, anthropometry, I make a departure from 1472H, because 1472H, the latest revision of this military standard, doesn't include the anthropometry tables that 1472G did, the previous version. So I'm talking about G sometimes in these lectures, and I'm talking about H sometimes. So you may want to, make sure you're looking carefully as to which one I'm referring to. Each of them are on the Canvas website, obviously. 1472G I put in the module with, with anthropometry, so you can find it there. All right, so cruising on, we're still in 1472H. This would be dimensions for a standing workstation. So seated workstation, standing workstation. Similarly, we've got, the dimensions we can go for. Oh, look at this Arctic. So this does include clothing, at least for some of the dimensions. Okay, so in addition to the humans fitting at the desk, being at the right height, etc., we also have to think about the force that maybe needs to be applied by a human through controls that are in that workstation. So we also have anthropometric data for this. So page 103 in 1472H will tell you, hey, here's all of the, and you can, using anthropometry and the workstation design for either of this, seated or standing, you may be able to say, okay, at this height, here's where the elbow will be, the angle of the elbow, and therefore how much force can be applied, in this sort of motion. And then you're going to want to know, like what sort of force is required, and you may adjust the position of the control to account for the ability to present, more force. So for example, 30, 0, 30, 60, 90, these positions will give different force abilities. And so we need to think about that when we place our controls. Okay. The question of, do we work in a standing desk or a seated desk, do standing work, etc. There's a number of factors to consider. And I'm not going to universally say that standing work is the way to go, even though frequently you see me standing. I'm sitting right now, but you frequently see me standing during my lectures because I like to lecture standing up. I guess why am I not right now? Because I don't have a way to put my, I don't have a workstation that supports me standing. But there are reasons why, in particular, you at home may want to consider your own home office, including a standing desk, or your professional office. If you're doing things that are routine, standing is nice because it gives us a little more energy. It gives us a little more, awareness, awakeness, I should say. If you're doing things frequently, also this allows a little more flexibility, things that are short in duration, so you're not developing a lot of fatigue from standing all day. Advantages, we can reach further. We've got more space to work with when we're standing. We can also produce more force. Now, we can apply more force in a standing desk. Remember that for your homework assignment. Let's just say that. There you go. But there is a specific thing we would want to do to make sure that while we're standing, we can exert that force. And so there is a certain ideal height for the nature of the work you're doing. Okay. Yes, if somebody is seated, they're not going to have the same field of view. They won't have the same range of reach. Some data have shown that standing for a day at the office versus sitting, the difference may be as much as 40% of calories burned. I've never really tested that myself. I like using my standing desk because after lunch, I don't sit down and then start getting nap sleepy. If I stand up and I'm moving, I can keep the flow going. Lower risk of back problems. I will also note though that I've been using standing desks as my primary office space for probably 7 or 8 years now. And I have been through a series of lifelong lower back problems. I don't know if I made it any better with the standing, but I also know that if you exclusively stand, that's not good either. And so there is some aspect of a rotation of sitting and standing that keeps your physical health in the best shape. And then I would say probably cognitively and your ability to produce work is maximized if you do some sort of rotation of standing, sitting, and moving around a little bit. Good, yes, alertness and cognitive advantages. That's my primary reason for like my standing desk. Fatigue will be a bigger issue. And if I'm standing, I can dance, I can move around, I can shift my weight, I can back up a little bit, I can bend over, more full body movement allows me to kind of fight that muscle fatigue, and I guess I'm not as bored if I can dance. And we save space. Okay, so I didn't think about this, but when I set up my COVID lecture station at home, that was when I realized I wasn't going to the office very often. I needed a home office for lecturing. And I set it up as a standing station. And I did it in a space that's kind of limited in my house. And I realized, oh, this is nice because when I have it as a standing desk, I have all of this additional room to move around because I don't have to account for, seated knee space or, have something that goes under the table, that kind of thing. All right, here you go. You're going to need to know this for your homework. Okay. The nature of the work is average. So I don't know what I'm going to do necessarily. I've got, some stuff that might take a little bit of me hefting force and a lot of, stuff that maybe takes, close eye to it. The standard here is to design for elbow height. So as I'm standing, I'm not going to stand here because it'll be weird, but you want this right here for light work. You basically want the height of the workstation to be right at about elbow rest height. Okay, and that's just going to give us the best position for when our arms are at a 90-degree angle. This is when we can exert the most, we can do the most movement and force. If we are doing heavy work, like for example, hauling heavy things up to my desk and messing with them and hauling them off, like you might need to do for a homework or exam question, take that elbow level height and drop it 4 inches. And what you can see here, this is going to give me more room to, exert downward force to, I don't have to lift something as high, which is harder and harder the closer you get to your, the higher you go. So heavy work, meaning I got to exert force, lower the desk some. If I'm doing precision work, which I would say would be the kind of thing where you have to look at it real closely, your hands are closer to your face, and if your elbows have something to rest on, you can be a lot more stable in that sort of work. So in this case, we want to raise the platform about 4 inches. And you might imagine that, hey, wouldn't it be nice if this was an adjustable standing desk? So based on, whatever I'm trying to do, I could adjust it for precision work, regular work, or down for heavy work. And so kind of the design standard here would be, let's design for the 50th percentile elbow height, and let's look at the 95th percentile for precision and the 5th percentile for needing to exert force, heavy work, and that might be the full range of adjustability that we shoot for. Assuming you need that adjustability for multiple different people or multiple different functions. Okay, so downsides of standing all day. You do have fatigue in the legs. I've had, I guess I've become relatively accustomed to it through, years of standing. But I can tell you it does make a surprising difference what's going on with your feet. And so in my standing workstation at home, I try to be wearing shoes, even if I'm, in the house and nobody can see my feet. And I also have a anti-fatigue mat that I stand on. It's just basically a cushioned mat. It's got some firmness to it. It's actually a yoga mat that I've repurposed. But this is a great way to relieve some of that fatigue, especially if you're standing all day. So yeah, we can get nice shoes. We can get work mats like this, and these are just some examples, in professional settings. They basically give a little bit of cushion, and then that's just really nice on our feet. Cushion shoes or insoles. Dr. Scholl's work, insoles. This is a great a great investment if you're on your feet all day, I'll tell you what. And then foot rests. And I have one of these. I got one of these guys. I almost this, it looks very similar to this. And I put it there if I'm standing, I'll rest one leg for a little bit. I'll rest another leg for a little bit. It's a great way to kind of relieve some of that, maybe pressure in some of the legs from fluid accumulation. This is at a bar. And so if you've ever seen this like bar rail here, that's another thing. You can be at the bar and resting feet on there, one foot or the other. You could also be sitting in a stool and resting them there, and that can also be helpful at times. Okay, so seated work. If we're not standing, we're probably seated. What's benefit of this? We'll think about driving a car. If we are standing and we're driving a car, that takes away two of our control limbs, right? Our legs. And so, or at least one of them. So if we're seated, we have an additional controlling limb, right? All right. We can exert more force through our feet if we're seated than if we're standing. Reduces fatigue because we're seated, right? Greater stability if you have equipment that might jostle you a little bit, like a lot of heavy machinery. And additionally, if you have a need for precision tasks, then you're going to also need to be, probably seated just to keep your body from being too much affected by perturbations. So a seated work surface, kind of ideal here, would be perfectly flat if you're writing, or I guess if you're typing. Nice to have a perfectly flat top for that, just by the nature of the way we perform that activity. If you're reading something, you don't want to have too much bending over and looking down, because not only is that bad for your posture, in terms of muscularly, in terms of potentially long-term sorts of problems, it also reduces the blood flow to the brain, which is the thing that reads. So, less neck bending means more optimal information processing from your head. Very good. So again, the ideal is the elbow at 90 degrees. It gives us the most range for anything we might do with those arms. You do need to consider with seated work that you have to have space for knees and feet, and also that you may need to adjust what's going on at the feet to accommodate certain populations. So think like, a booster, like foot pedal or something, foot brace, foot what? Oh, sorry. Okay. Good. Yeah. So 5% female would be a good, design standard for where do we put the footrest. Okay. Why is it a bad thing to sit all the time if it's more comfortable? We have better long-term health if we are at least well supported with our chairs. Standing will be even better than this, at least a rotation of the standing, sitting, and moving around. The ideal apparently for circulation, for the way that, I guess for circulation primarily and force distribution, these kneeling chairs are designed to be like the ideal configuration of legs and of supporting force. And I don't exactly know why that is, but there you go. And if you avoid being sedentary, get up, get down, move around for a bit, it's going to be a lot better long term. If any of us, we're all going to be very smart professionals, we would have the capability probably to sit at a desk in front of a computer all day. And I'll just recommend that, as you are continuing in the working world, make an effort to get up and move around once in a while. It'll not only help your productivity, your sense of, your awakeness, your alertness, but also helps you in terms of avoiding long-term, physical breakdowns from being sedentary, sitting there and just rotting away, right? All right. That's it for section subtopic 12.1. Thank you.